Everything was perfect until the bride vanished, leaving behind a cryptic note just 30 minutes before the ceremony. 5 years later, a blurred reflection in a diner window reignites the search that everyone else abandoned, except him. Before we start, please help me get to 1,000 subscribers. And write the title of a book everyone should read in the comments. The morning light filtered through the stained glass windows of St. Agnes Chapel, casting watercolor halos on polished marble floors. Tulips lined the aisle, Emily's favorite. The air buzzed with hushed laughter, the rustle of silk dresses, the low thrum of violin strings rehearsing one last time. Everything was perfect. Tom stood at the altar, his fingers clasped behind his back, the tailored lapel of his suit stiff against his chest. His best man leaned over and whispered a joke, something about cold feet. Tom smiled, but his eyes stayed fixed on the mahogany doors. He was ready. They were ready. The makeup artist was done. The dress fit like a whisper. Emily had laughed just an hour ago, biting her lip in the mirror as she adjusted the pearl comb in her hair, the one her grandmother left her. "Don't let me disappear," she joked. No one laughed now. 28 minutes before the ceremony, one bridesmaid found the empty room first. The vanity light still glowed. The bouquet sat untouched on the velvet stool. Her phone lay face down beside a small, folded piece of cream paper. Tom held that note in his hands now, his knuckles white, his breath uneven. "I'm sorry. This is the only way." The ink bled slightly where her pen must have paused. One corner was smudged, maybe by a tear, or maybe her thumb. The silence in the chapel cracked open as whispers grew. The organist stopped mid-scale. Someone's heels echoed too sharply on stone. Within an hour, the wedding guests were gone. Within 2, the police arrived. Within 3, her face was on the local news. Tom sat on the chapel steps, his tie loosened, the note folded and unfolded in his hands. Behind him, voices murmured, officers discussing CCTV, bridesmaids calling her phone, a weeping mother demanding answers that no one had. There were no signs of struggle, no witnesses, no farewell messages beyond the note. Her car was still parked out front. She had simply vanished. Some said she ran. Cold feet, after all. Others wondered if there was someone else. Tom said nothing. The image of her from that morning burned behind his eyes. Her laughter, her promise, the way she looked at him when she said, "Don't let me disappear." But she did, and no one could find her. 5 years later, the chapel was gone. They tore it down 2 summers after Emily vanished, cracks in the foundation, the city said. But Tom always thought of it as something else, a wound the town couldn't bear to look at anymore. Easier to bury it under a parking lot and forget. Unlike him, Tom lived above a small repair shop on the edge of town, the kind with rusting signage and oil stains that no solvent could lift. He fixed broken things, dishwashers, radios, ceiling fans, but nothing ever stayed fixed for long. Least of all himself. He had grown thinner, quiet. Not the man who once laughed with his fiancée under string lights while planning a backyard honeymoon. Now, he kept his world small, routine, predictable. Wake up, work, eat, watch. And every night, before turning off the lights, Tom would sit at his desk, open the same folder on his old laptop, and replay footage from the church's security system. There were only 4 hours of video. He had memorized every second. The bridesmaids entering with coffee. Emily laughing with her sister in the hallway. A figure, maybe a florist, maybe not, carrying a crate of peonies. The hallway empty. Then, gone. Every night he watched, hoping this time a detail would shift. A reflection he hadn't noticed. A movement behind the curtains. A shadow where there shouldn't be one. But the video never changed. People had moved on. Her friends married. Her parents moved out of state. The police had closed the file. No body, no crime. Just a woman who, in their words, chose a different life. Sometimes he heard it in the grocery store. She just didn't want to marry him. She probably lives on a beach somewhere. Her Tom still can't let go. Let go? Let go of what? Of a voice that echoed every time the wind rattled the window panes? Of a smile that lived behind his eyelids like a ghost? Of a note that said nothing and everything all at once? He couldn't. He wouldn't. So he lived like this, between days and memories, between what was and what might still be, surrounded by broken machines, half-eaten dinners, and silence. Only two things remained untouched on the shelf above his desk. A photo of Emily on that morning, her eyes caught mid-laughter. And the note, "I'm sorry. This is the only way." He didn't know what it meant, but he hadn't stopped trying to understand it. The diner was nothing special. A corner joint on 5th and Mercer, tucked between a dry cleaner and a vape shop. Chrome bar stools. Peeling leather booths. A waitress who called everyone Han and poured coffee like it was a lifeline. Tom didn't even like the place. But he stopped there sometimes after late jobs when the silence of his apartment threatened to swallow him whole. That night, it was raining. The kind of soft, constant drizzle that made the sidewalks shine like black mirrors. He sat in the booth furthest from the door, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee, half watching the world blur beyond the window. He wasn't thinking of Emily. Not at that moment. He was thinking about a leaky sink he couldn't fix and a screw that had snapped in his palm that morning. He was thinking about how tired he was of pretending he'd moved on. Then he saw her. Or rather, the reflection. It started as a shimmer in the window movement caught between raindrops and neon. A woman stepping out of the building across the street. Head turned, umbrella low. She wore a navy blue coat, buttoned to the neck. But it was the hairpiece that stopped his breath. A pearl comb, small, crescent-shaped, nestled into her twist of dark auburn hair. Exactly like Emily's. No, it was Emily's. He blinked, heart stuttering. She was walking fast, crossing toward the corner. Tom shoved the booth aside and bolted for the door, nearly knocking over the waitress with the coffee pot. "Tom? Everything okay?" The bell over the door jangled violently as he burst into the street. Rain slicked his shoulders. The cold bit through his sleeves. But he didn't feel it. His eyes searched left, right, scanning the sidewalk, the passing figures. An umbrella turned. Blonde. Not her. Another woman ducked into a cab. Wrong coat. Where? Then he saw her. Half a block ahead, turning the corner. The same height. Same gait. "Emily," he shouted, not caring who heard. The figure paused. Just for a second. And then kept walking, disappearing into the press of the night. Tom ran. His shoes splashed through puddles, breath ragged, soaked through in seconds. But when he turned the corner, she was gone. Just noise. Car horns. Tail lights. A drunk man laughing under a canopy. He stood there, panting, rain streaming down his face, mixing with something else, grief, fury, disbelief. A cab sprayed his jeans as it passed. He didn't move. In his chest, something cracked open. It wasn't a trick of light. Not this time. It was her. It was her. The pearl comb, the one she had worn that morning, wasn't sold in stores. It had belonged to her grandmother. A one-of-a-kind antique. Emily always said it carried stories in its curve. She still had it, which meant she was alive. Not a memory. Not a ghost. Not a woman who chose a different life. She was here, and she didn't want to be found. But Tom had just found her shadow, and shadows always lead somewhere. The rain was still clinging to his jacket by the time Tom got home, cold beads trailing down his spine as he peeled it off and dropped it on the floor. He didn't turn on the main light, just the desk lamp, which cast the apartment in amber gloom. He hadn't run like that in years. Not since that day. His knees ached. His chest burned. But his mind was alight. The comb was real. The reflection wasn't a dream. So now, the question wasn't if she was alive. It was why she was hiding. He opened the drawer under his desk, the one he hadn't touched in over a year. Inside were relics, labeled flash drives, burned CDs, photographs sealed in plastic. A time capsule of obsession. He didn't hesitate. He plugged in the oldest drive. On-screen bloomed the same files he'd pored over countless times. Interview clips, security footage, scanned receipts, guest lists, police transcripts. A digital autopsy of the day she vanished. But now, his eyes searched differently. This time, he wasn't just looking for her. He was looking for anyone else. He opened the wedding photos, hundreds of them. The official photographer's shots, plus the ones guests had sent later. He clicked through them slowly. The chapel, the dressing room, the rehearsal dinner, her hand in his. Then, one frame. It wasn't centered. It wasn't meant to be important. The camera had caught it by accident, a wide-angle shot outside the chapel, just before guests began to file in. And in the background, partially obscured by an SUV, stood a man. Dark blazer. Sunglasses, though it had been cloudy. Leaning against a tree, looking straight at the camera. Tom leaned closer. His stomach turned. There was something off about the man's posture. Not casual. Not like a guest. His arms were crossed tightly. His jaw tense. A stranger. Tom's mind jolted. He had seen that face. Just hours ago. In the restaurant. Not in focus. Not clearly. But when he jumped from his booth, someone had looked up from a corner table, briefly, just as Tom rushed past. It had been this man. Same rigid shoulders. Same shadowed eyes. Watching. Not eating. Watching. Tom stood slowly, the weight of the revelation settling on him like dust on old photos. This wasn't just about Emily anymore. This was organized. Someone had been watching that day. And someone was watching now. He opened a new folder. Created a new file. Scanned the photo. Zoomed in. He didn't have a name. Not yet. But he had a face. The precinct hadn't changed. Same chipped linoleum floors. Same burnt coffee smell. Same flickering fluorescent lights that made everything look grayer than it was. Tom sat across from Detective Carl Renner, the man who led Emily's missing person case 5 years ago. Renner looked older. Thicker around the middle. More tired. But his eyes hadn't changed, sharp, shrewd, and disinterested in theories he couldn't prove on paper. "So you think you saw her?" Renner said flatly, flipping through the printed photo of the unknown man outside the chapel. 5 years after she disappears. "I don't think," Tom said. "I know." Renner sighed, tossed the photo back on the desk like it was a grocery receipt. "Tom, it's been half a decade. We ran the file clean. No activity on her cards, no credible sightings, no DNA hits. People vanish all the time. She didn't vanish. She was taken." Renner leaned back, rubbed his temple. "You said that before. You had no proof then. You have no proof now." Tom clenched his jaw. "I saw her. She wore the same hairpiece. The one her grandmother. Maybe someone bought one just like it. It's one of a kind." Renner looked at him. Something in his eyes changed, less annoyance, more weariness. "Look," he said, voice lower, off the record. "Sometimes, people don't want to be found. You ever think of that?" Tom's breath caught. "She didn't leave me. She wouldn't have. She said. She left a note, Tom. You showed it to us." "I'm sorry. This is the only way." "Right," Tom whispered. "But the only way what?" "That note never made sense. She was happy. She was smiling that morning." Renner stood and moved to close the door to his office. He didn't sit again. "There are things," he said, his tone shifting, more cautious now, "that don't need to be unburied. People with connections. History. Do yourself a favor. Let it go. Before someone else decides you're asking the wrong questions." Tom stared at him. It wasn't just a warning. It was a message. He stood slowly. The silence between them tightened. "Then the system really is broken," he said, voice steady. Renner didn't answer. The call rang 5 times before Liana picked up. Her voice was softer than Tom remembered. Cautious. Like someone expecting a wrong number. "Liana." "It's Tom." A pause. Breathing. "I figured you'd call. Eventually." They met the next day at a small tea house 2 towns over, her choice, not his. Liana was already seated when he arrived, tucked into a corner booth, sleeves pulled over her wrists, sunglasses still on despite the overcast sky filtering through the windows. She hadn't changed much, except for the tightness in her shoulders, and the way she avoided looking him directly in the eye. Tom sat across from her. Neither of them reached for the menu. "You said in your message it was urgent," she said. "I saw Emily." The spoon she was stirring her tea with froze mid-circle, then resumed. Slower. "I saw her 2 nights ago. Outside a diner on Mercer. She was wearing the comb. That comb. Still, no eye contact. Just another slow stir. Maybe you saw someone who looked like her. I've lived with her face in my head for 5 years, Liana. I'd know it in a shadow. It was her." She set the spoon down, finally looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "What if she didn't want to be found?" Tom leaned in. "What does that mean?" She looked away again. Her fingers trembled as they traced the rim of her cup. "Emily was scared, Tom. More than you ever knew." "Scared of what?" Silence. "Of everything," Liana said finally. "But mostly of disappointing him." Tom narrowed his eyes. "Who?" "Our father." The air shifted. A small, Invisible quake passed between them. You always saw the good parts of her, Liana continued, voice brittle. The romantic ones. The dreamy ones. But you didn't grow up with her. Not like I did. You didn't see how small she got when he walked into her room. Tom tried to picture Emily shrinking. Couldn't. He didn't hit us, Liana added quickly, as if reading his thoughts. He never had to. He used silence, guilt, money, and rules that made no sense. She fidgeted with her necklace, a small silver anchor. He controlled everything. Who she dated, what she studied, when she spoke. And when you two got serious, he smiled. But it was the smile, the one we learned to read as a warning. Tom sat back, absorbing her words like slow poison. She said once, Liana whispered, that she felt like a porcelain doll in a glass box. Pretty, perfect, and constantly watched. Why didn't she ever tell me this? He asked. Liana's eyes met his now, suddenly full of grief. Because she loved you. And she knew if she told you, you'd fight for her. And fighting him? That meant war. Tom's throat tightened. His mind reeled back to the chapel. The way she smiled. The slight hesitation. The cryptic note. This is the only way. She wasn't running from me, he murmured. No, Liana said softly. She was trying to protect you from him. The road to Millfield curved through rows of winter-stripped maples and sleepy storefronts with fading signs. It hadn't changed much. Small towns rarely did. The same drugstore with the squeaky door. The same cinema with a half-lit marquee. The same feeling Tom remembered the first time Emily brought him here, like stepping into a preserved memory someone forgot to dust off. But this time, he wasn't holding her hand. He stopped first at Millfield High School. The secretary looked puzzled when he explained who he was. She vaguely remembered Emily, always so quiet, so polite, but records were archived, teachers retired, and no one had seen her in years. Then he tried the library. The carpet still smelled like mildew and pencil shavings. The reading chairs sagged the same way. He ran his fingers along the spines in the psychology section, where Emily once spent afternoons reading about human behavior, afraid of her own reactions. Nothing. It was only when he rang the doorbell at a small white house on Maple Lane that something shifted. Claire, he asked, when the woman opened the door. She blinked at him, suspicious at first. Then recognition lit her face. Tom. From the wedding. He gave a sad smile. That never happened. Claire nodded, stepped aside. Come in. The house was warm. Lived in. Toys scattered near the couch. The scent of apples and dust. Claire had aged the way real people do, gracefully, with tired eyes and the strength of someone who's been through their own storms. I haven't heard from her, she said quickly, before he even sat down. Not since that day. Not a word. I believe you, Tom said. I need to understand who she was before I met her. Claire tilted her head. She never let you see it, did she? The cracks. He stayed silent. Claire stood, crossed the room, and returned with an old book. A faded copy of Wuthering Heights. The corners curled, the pages warped. She used to hide things in here. Notes, sketches, even her diary once. Said no one would ever check the Brontes. Tom took it gently, opened the cover. There, wedged between the pages, was a small leather notebook. The kind with fraying edges and a broken elastic band. His hands trembled. He opened it. The writing was unmistakably hers, slanted, thoughtful, loops that curled just a little too long. He checks the locks twice every night. He calls it love, but it feels like surveillance. I dreamed of taking a train with no destination. Just leaving. Just breathing. But he'll never let me go. Even Tom doesn't know what I'm carrying. I love him. But if he knew, he'd try to fix it. And he can't. No one can. I can't escape. I can't escape. I can't. Tom swallowed hard, skipping pages, unable to read everything at once. The last entry was the most chilling. If you find this, I'm gone. Don't try to follow. Not because I don't want to be found, but because it's not safe. For you. For anyone. This is the only way I could disappear without him disappearing me first. He closed the journal with a sharp breath. Claire watched him quiet. Her eyes were glassy. She was never afraid of the world, she said. She was afraid of him. The Hawthorne estate sat behind wrought iron gates at the edge of the county, tucked among old oaks in silence. From the road, it looked like a portrait, grand, untouched, frozen in prestige. But Tom knew now facades could lie. Her father had been a judge, retired now, but his name still commanded respect in legal circles and fear in the town. The kind of man who shook hands without smiling, who built reputations like walls and buried secrets behind them. Tom had only met him twice, once over dinner, once at the engagement party. Both times, the judge looked through him, not at him. "You're a fixer, right?" he had asked. "Fix things. That's good. Society needs hands, not voices." Emily had smiled politely, eyes darting like she was counting exits. Now, Tom stood outside the gates, watching. The place was empty, shuttered. Rumors said the old man had moved out west after Emily disappeared. A health sabbatical, some claimed. A quiet retreat. But someone had worked here back then. Someone had seen. He tracked them through town records, old employment files, even social media. Most were long gone. But one name appeared again, handwritten in the margin of a maintenance report. Walter Denham, groundskeeper. Tom found him in a trailer park 3 miles south. The kind with plastic flamingos, satellite dishes, and the scent of old grease and soil. Walter answered the door shirtless, wiry and sunburnt. He squinted at Tom, then exhaled. "You're the groom." Tom nodded. "I need to ask you something. About that morning." Walter scratched his jaw. "They told me not to talk." "Who?" "The lawyers." "After she disappeared." Tom stepped forward, his voice quiet. "She didn't disappear. She was taken. And you saw something." Walter looked past him, toward the dying sun over the trees. His voice dropped. "I wasn't supposed to be there that early. Came in to fix a broken irrigation valve. 6 a.m. sharp." He paused. "She was on the porch, wearing white, like she was going somewhere." Tom's breath caught. "Then what?" Walter swallowed. Black car pulled up. Big. Tinted. One of those Lincoln Town cars. Driver got out. Didn't speak. Just opened the back door. "Did she get in?" Walter nodded, slowly. "Not willingly. There was someone else. A man. Older. Took her by the arm." Tom's pulse thudded. "Did she resist?" "She looked frozen. Like a kid told not to cry in public." Tom gripped the railing. "Why didn't you come forward?" Walter laughed bitterly. "Come forward to who?" "The man she left with was her father. I work landscaping. He ran the courts." The room looked smaller than he remembered. Same floral wallpaper. Same rattling air conditioner in the window. Same cracked lampshade over the nightstand. Tom sat at the edge of the bed, hands clasped between his knees, staring at the spot on the floor where Emily's suitcase had once rested. He could almost hear the zipper, her laugh as she unpacked, one hand smoothing out her dress, the other stealing glances at him. They'd stayed here the night before the ceremony. A quiet place outside town, away from noise and expectations. She'd said she wanted just one night to breathe before the world changed. Now, it was just him, breathing into silence. His jacket was tossed over the chair. Emily's old journal lay open on the blanket beside him. Tom rubbed his face. His skin felt raw, stretched. He hadn't eaten in hours. Sleep came in flickers now. Always broken. He spoke aloud to the room. "I don't know anymore." His voice was hoarse. It felt strange, hearing it bounce off the walls. "Maybe they're right. Maybe you didn't want to be found. Maybe you really chose this." Him. The silence. He looked toward the mirror, cracked at the corner, like memory. "I keep thinking about the note. About that look in your eyes the last time I saw you. I've torn it apart in my head 1,000 times. Looking for a clue. A code. Anything." He stood up abruptly, began pacing. "I've seen women vanish in movies. Walk out on weddings. But that wasn't you, was it? You weren't selfish. You weren't cruel." He stopped near the window, drew the curtain just slightly, enough to see the gravel lot outside. "So why do I feel like I'm chasing someone who doesn't want to be caught?" His voice cracked. "Why did you make me carry this, Emily?" The wind picked up outside. Branches scraped the glass. Then, silence again. And into that stillness, something small flickered. Not a memory. A certainty. Her eyes. That morning. That exact moment, she said, "Don't let me disappear." He hadn't seen fear in them. He'd seen pleading. Desperation. A cry she hadn't spoken aloud because she couldn't. Tom sat back down, the air suddenly heavier. "No," he whispered. "No, you didn't want this. You were trying to get out. You were trying to protect me." And now I'm the only one left who remembers what you looked like when you were still free. He stared at the journal. The words blurred, but one line stood clear. I can't escape. Not without help. The building was sleek, soulless. Gray glass and steel, rising like judgment above the city. A private law firm on the top floor, discreetly marked. His receptionist wore a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. Judge Hawthorne isn't taking walk-ins, she said. Tom didn't blink. Tell him it's about Emily. A pause. A flicker in her composure. 10 minutes later, the door opened. The office was cold. Minimalist. One wall lined with legal volumes. Another, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city like a throne room over a conquered land. Richard Hawthorne stood behind his desk, untouched by time. Immaculately tailored, posture straight, eyes as unreadable as ever. Thomas, he said, as though greeting a minor inconvenience. To what do I owe this? Surprise? Tom stepped forward. I saw her. Hawthorne raised one brow. Who? Don't play games. A long, measured breath. Emily made her choice. Years ago. Tom's fist clenched at his sides. She was taken. I have a witness. Walter Denham. The morning of the wedding. Black car. Your car. The judge didn't flinch. She was escorted, Thomas. For her safety. For yours, you mean? Hawthorne's mouth curved, not a smile, but something colder. Emily was unstable, pressured. We intervened for her protection. Tom stepped closer. And the diary? The one hidden in a Bronte novel? The one where she wrote about you watching her like a prisoner? That protection? For the first time, Hawthorne's eye twitched. Just a fraction. But enough. He walked slowly around the desk, hands folded behind his back. You read something she wrote during an emotional episode and want to rewrite history, he said, voice smooth as courtroom marble. Be careful, Tom. You're walking into dangerous waters. Tom didn't respond. He held the silence between them like a blade. You don't scare me, he finally said. You should. That was it. That was the real mask dropping. Tom turned and walked out, his heart pounding harder than it had in years. But the threats didn't wait long. The first phone call came that evening. No voice. Just silence, then a click. The second came an hour later. Stop digging, a low voice muttered. Then hung up. The third came the next morning, blocked number, distorted tone. You don't know who you're dealing with. Stay away, or you'll vanish like she did. The diner on Mercer hadn't changed since that night. Same chipped Formica counters, same buzzing neon sign in the window. But this time, Tom didn't sit at his usual booth. He stood at the counter, turning the photo over and over in his hands, the blown-up image of Emily taken from a wedding video still. Her smile was soft, unguarded. A memory frozen just hours before she vanished. He was about to leave when a voice behind him spoke, hesitant. That's her, isn't it? Tom turned. The waitress, tall, dark hair pulled into a bun, maybe late 20s, stood holding a coffee pot, her eyes fixed on the photo like it was a ghost. You've seen her? Tom asked, heart lurching. She hesitated. Looked around. Not officially. But I swear I've served her. Twice. Maybe 3 times. She never gave a name. Paid in cash. Sat in the far booth every time. Tom stepped closer, lowering his voice. When? Last month, the waitress said, voice low. And maybe 6 weeks before that. Always early morning, before we get the breakfast rush. His mind whirled. That would match the time of day Emily used to go running. When the world was quieter. When fewer eyes watched. Was she alone? He asked. A pause. The waitress's expression changed. Tightened. No. There was a man. Not her age. Quiet. Broad shoulders. Sat across from her. Didn't eat. Just watched. Security? Tom asked. Felt more like a handler, she whispered. She never made eye contact with anyone. Didn't talk unless spoken to. But once. She trailed off. What? Tom leaned in. She dropped a napkin. Just let it fall. I bent to pick it up, and when I handed it back, she touched my wrist. Just for a second. Her eyes moistened. She didn't say anything. But I remember thinking that's not how someone touches a stranger. It felt like, please help me, but with no words. Tom felt the floor shift beneath him. He gripped the edge of the counter. Do you know where she went? The waitress nodded slowly. They left together and walked. I saw them head north, past the strip mall. There's an old lodge just off the highway. Maple Glen Inn. Not many people go there now. It's private. Discreet. Cash only. A long silence passed. Then she added, almost apologetically, I didn't know who she was until just now. But I knew something wasn't right. Tom gave a half nod, more gratitude than words could carry. What's your name? He asked. Josie. Thank you, Josie. You might have just saved her. She reached into her apron and scribbled something on a notepad, the address of the lodge. As she tore the page free, her hand trembled. Be careful, she said. He looked like someone who wouldn't hesitate. Tom took the paper, folded it carefully, and tucked it into his jacket. The Maple Glen Inn sat crouched beneath a wall of pines, just off the old highway. Weather-worn shingles, a dimly lit porch, the sign barely readable in the dusk. It looked abandoned to most, the kind of place drivers passed without noticing. But Tom noticed everything now. He parked his truck 3 lots away and approached on foot. His boots sank into wet pine needles. The air was heavy with mist and silence. The front desk was empty. No bell. No register. Just a dusty key rack and the faint scent of wood smoke. A small television buzzed behind the counter, showing static. He moved down the hallway slowly. Each door had a brass number. Most were closed tight. He paused at room 12, the number Josie had underlined. He pressed his ear to the door. Silence. Then, a faint creak. Like someone shifting on a mattress. He tried the knob. Locked. Tom glanced back down the hallway. Still no one. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out the tension wrench and pick he hadn't used in years, leftover tools from a former life fixing locks in a hardware store. 2 minutes. Click. He opened the door carefully. The room was dim, curtains drawn. A lamp glowed near the bed. The air smelled faintly of lavender and something sterile, disinfectant. The bed was made. The room tidy. Too tidy. On the desk, a book with a pressed flower inside. On the nightstand, a teacup still warm to the touch. He stepped inside. That's when he heard the door slam behind him. 2 men, one in a suit, the other in plain black, built like a wall. Tom spun. I'm not here to... A fist drove into his ribs. Not enough to break. Just enough to fold. He dropped to one knee, breath gone. The suited man knelt, calm, smiling. Curiosity's a dangerous thing, he said softly. Tom coughed, struggling to rise. Where is she? Another blow, this time to the shoulder, not the face. Deliberate. Controlled. You think this is some romantic rescue? Some lost lover fairy tale? Tom gritted his teeth. I know she didn't leave by choice. The suited man's smile faded. You're interfering with something bigger than you understand. You're not the first who's tried. You won't be the last. Tom looked up, eyes burning. She's alive, isn't she? Silence. Then the man said, she's contained. That word. Contained. Like a threat. Like a possession. She was never yours to find. Tom lunged. Not far, but enough to make them both step back. That was all he needed. Because fear had cracked through the man's mask. They were worried. Which meant he was close. Too close. The larger man stepped forward again. Tom braced. But the suited one lifted a hand. Let him go. What? I said let him go. Not yet. He needs to understand what it feels like to stand on the edge and know he can't change a thing. Tom gasped as they pulled him up and shoved him into the hallway. Next time, the suited man said, straightening his collar, you won't walk away. The door slammed behind him. Tom staggered into the night air, chest heaving, limbs screaming. But he smiled. Because she was here. And they were scared. Which meant this was far from over. Tom's breath burned like fire as he stumbled through the backwoods behind the Maple Glen Inn. Branches whipped at his arms, mud clung to his boots, but he didn't stop. They had let him go, but not out of mercy. It was a warning. Next time, he wouldn't walk away. By the time he reached the edge of the highway, headlights swept over him, a car slowing, brakes squealing. The door flung open. Tom. It was Josie. She jumped out before the car fully stopped, panic in her eyes. What the hell happened? He collapsed into the passenger seat. They had her, he gasped. Or they did. Room 12. Did you see her? No. But they knew I was coming. I walked right into it. Josie's hands gripped the wheel tighter. We need proof. She turned the car around sharply. There's a gas station next to the lodge. I saw a camera there. It might have caught something. Tom nodded. already trying to slow his breathing. Let's go. The gas station attendant was skeptical at first, a kid with too much eyeliner and too little concern. But when Josie showed her server ID and Tom mentioned the lodge, the kid suddenly looked nervous. They told us not to talk about that place, he muttered, chewing his lip. Did they ask you to delete anything? Josie asked. A beat. Then, no, but they said the system had to be down for maintenance. But I didn't shut it off. It's all still there, I think. 10 minutes later, the screen flickered. A feed from a single, grimy camera aimed at the lot outside Maple Glen. The image was grainy, black and white, but it was enough. Rewind, Tom said. Josie scrubbed back, then stopped. There. A woman stepped out from the side entrance of the lodge, wearing a long coat. Her head low, hair tied up. The grain was terrible, but Tom leaned closer. It was her. Even in shadows, he knew the way she moved, the slight tilt of her head, the way her hands tucked into the sleeves of her coat. She walked to the trash can outside the gas station, looked around quickly, and slid something beneath the liner. Then she turned, walked back toward the lodge. Not 5 seconds later, a large man, the one Tom had seen before, exited after her. She disappeared from view. Josie froze the frame. Check the bin. Tom was already running. They tore through plastic bags, old coffee cups, and fast food wrappers. The stench was rancid. But deep beneath the liner, tucked carefully between 2 damp cardboard trays, was a plastic sandwich bag. Inside, a pale blue envelope. Tom stared at it. His hands shook. He opened it carefully, as if afraid it would vanish like a dream. The handwriting unmistakable. Hers. Tom, I don't know how long I have, or if you'll ever see this. But if you do, know this. I am alive. This is not my choice. Everything they told you was a lie. I didn't leave you. I loved you then. I still do. Please, don't stop. E. Tom stood in stunned silence. The wind picked up, carrying pine needles across the lot. Josie stepped closer. She wrote it. He nodded, breath shallow. She's fighting. The truth had always been there, buried beneath silence, power, and a name that opened doors others weren't allowed to knock on. Richard Hawthorne hadn't just hidden Emily from the world. He had erased her. Tom sat in a quiet office above a local newspaper, the kind of place that still smelled of ink and typewriter oil. Across from him, a young journalist named Lena Mayers clicked through scans of Emily's diary, her jaw tightening with every line. This is, she whispered, eyes flicking to the words. He checks the locks twice every night. This is a record of control. Tom nodded. In fear. He slid the envelope toward her, the note Emily had left beneath the trash liner. Lena read it, then looked up at him, her face pale. You understand what you're accusing him of? Yes, Tom said. And I have no doubt. The puzzle had snapped into place after the note. Tom and Josie had dug deeper, local legal archives, family court rulings, sealed orders no one ever thought to question. But now he had the date, the docket number. The truth stung. 2 months before the wedding, Judge Hawthorne had used an emergency court session held behind closed doors to file for temporary psychiatric guardianship over his daughter. The reason? Signs of emotional instability, disorientation, and potential harm to herself or others. The evidence? A short statement from a paid physician. The judge who ruled on the case? Himself. Emily had been declared legally incapacitated by her own father, rendering her unable to make medical, legal, or marital decisions. She couldn't sign contracts. She couldn't speak publicly on her own behalf. She couldn't get married. The wedding was an illusion. The note? The escape? All planned to make her vanish before the truth came out. She tried to tell me, Tom murmured. But she knew. Knew I'd fight. Knew he'd destroy me to stop it. Lena sat back, stunned. You said she's still alive? Yes. At the lodge. I saw her on the camera. I found the note. She's being held quietly, under care. No records. No visitors. Lena looked at the journal again. This is enough to reopen everything. She reached for her recorder. I'm going to write this. But you need to understand. Going public will burn every bridge you still have left. You sure? Tom's eyes were steady. Clear. I'm not here to cross bridges. I'm here to blow them up. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the courthouse dome, the article went live. The judge's daughter, How power, silence, and one man's obsession hid a woman in plain sight. The story swept through the town like fire across dry fields. And this time, the silence wasn't strong enough to stop it. It happened faster than anyone expected. By dawn, the story had gone national. By noon, reporters surrounded the courthouse. By evening, the state attorney's office had issued a statement due to newly uncovered evidence and potential judicial misconduct. A full investigation into former Judge Richard Hawthorne is underway. The lodge was raided the next day. Tom waited outside in the rain, fists clenched, heart pounding, as black SUVs rolled in and uniformed officers stepped out, not the kind you could bribe or dismiss. They went in with a warrant. What they found inside wasn't a crime scene in the traditional sense, but it was no less horrifying. A back corridor that wasn't on the floor plan. A locked room. A live-in nurse with a fabricated license. And Emily, pale, quiet, alive, sitting in a chair by the window, staring at a tree swaying just beyond the glass. She turned her head slowly when they entered. Didn't speak. Didn't move. But when she saw Tom standing behind the officers, drenched, shaking, her expression changed. Just slightly. The recognition was slow, like someone waking from a long, drug dream. Her eyes widened, then filled, and Tom saw it. For the first time in 5 years, she looked at him without fear. They didn't speak at first. Too many people. Too much shock. The medic wrapped her in a blanket, gently guided her to the van. She glanced back only once, toward the lodge. Then back at him. Later, at the hospital, they let him in. She sat on the edge of the bed, knees pulled up, fingers fidgeting with the hospital bracelet. He stepped in slowly, sat across from her. Silence hung thick. Then she spoke, voice hoarse. "I thought you'd forget me." Tom swallowed. "Never. I wanted to scream every time I heard a car drive past. But they told me you stopped looking, that you moved on." He shook his head, eyes glassy. "I looked in every mirror, every window, every crowd." She smiled, barely. A flicker. "I waited for someone to believe me." "I did." A pause. Then she whispered, "You didn't give up." He took her hand, slowly, like it might shatter. "No," he said. "Because the girl I fell in love with doesn't vanish. She fights." Her fingers squeezed his. Not hard, but enough. Outside the hospital, the world was still chaotic. Press conferences, legal fallout, hearings to come. Richard Hawthorne had been arrested that morning. Charges: abuse of power, unlawful detainment, falsification of records, and more yet to be named. But inside that room, there was only the sound of steady breath and the presence of two people, both cracked, both surviving, beginning to feel the first tremors of freedom. The diner on Mercer looked exactly the same. Same flickering neon sign. Same rain tracing lazy lines down the windows. Same hum of conversation, cutlery against porcelain, the low hiss of coffee on the warmer. But everything was different now. Tom sat at the booth by the window, hands around a half-empty mug. Across from him, Emily. No longer hidden behind a glass wall of fear. No longer a reflection. Real. Present. She wore a soft gray sweater, hair loose around her shoulders. No more handlers. No shadows in her eyes. Only the quiet exhaustion of someone slowly waking into her own life again. And yet, something else. Stillness. But not numbness. Peace. The waitress poured their coffee, Josie. She smiled softly at Emily, who smiled back. No words needed. Some people were part of the story whether they meant to be or not. Outside, the street shimmered with rain. The world moved on. Emily turned her face toward the window. She watched the passing headlights, the slow blur of life. And then she caught it, their reflections in the glass. Not as ghosts. Not as memories. As two people, side by side. Together. She spoke quietly, almost to herself. "I used to look in windows and not recognize the woman staring back." Tom glanced over. She smiled now, not the practiced smile she once wore at galas and family events. A real one. Small. True. "But now I see her again." She reached across the table, touched his hand. "Now I see me. Because of you." Tom didn't speak. He didn't need to. They sat in silence as the camera, if there had been one, pulled back through the window, the glass misting with rain. Behind it, their mirrored forms glowed in soft amber light. Two silhouettes once lost in time, now grounded in a single, quiet moment. And somewhere beyond the frame, the story closed. Not with grand speeches, but with breath, with presence, with return.